Well, hello, and thanks for joining us for this Q&A for How It Ends, which is the closing night film of the 2021 Independent Film Festival Boston. My name is Brian Tamm. I'm the executive director of IFFBoston, and we have some special guests with us. Our guests tonight are no strangers to the festival. In 2009, we showed their film Breaking Upwards, and in 2017, Zoe Lister-Jones was here with us at the actual Coolidge for her film Band-Aid, which was the closing night film that year. Now, Darryl's last film, White Rabbit, showed at Wicked Queers, so we did not show it, but it's still really excellent. We highly recommend that you go check it out. And with that, I would like to welcome back to the virtual stage Darryl Wein and Zoe Lister-Jones.
Hi.
Hello to you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So I guess we should start with where the idea came from. Obviously, this is a pandemic film. Was this an idea that you had that became a pandemic film? Were there other things you were working on? How did you get started?
It was.
Zoe actually knew that a pandemic was coming back in 2002 and conceived of the whole idea of that. No, I'm just kidding. Zoe, go ahead.
It was a pandemic film from start to finish, soup to nuts, core cinema. We conceived of it pretty early on in the pandemic. I think Darryl wanted to make a film. I think we were obviously struggling in the ways that so many people were struggling with such a sort of unprecedented, overwhelming array of emotions in quarantine and having to face ourselves in these new ways. And I think we were both doing a lot of inner child work and in our respective therapy sessions. And Darryl, more than me, was kind of like, do we put this into a movie? And I was concerned and overwhelmed by life. And I think we both do generally as filmmakers put our larger existential questions into our work, and that's sort of how we process them. And so I'm glad that I allowed Darryl to convince me to do it in that way, because I think it did really serve as a lifeline, for both of us and for so many of the actors, in the film too. It was sort of proof that we could still have a sense of play at this very bleak time, and that we could show up however we were, wherever we were, and make art in a way that didn't feel inauthentic to our real life experiences, which was sort of by design. We made a film that was working within the same emotional landscape that we were living in, even though it wasn't set in the pandemic specifically, so that we could sort of have the space to explore those things. And then Darryl, edited it, during quarantine, and we premiered it at Sundance during quarantine. And so it's been a really interesting experience from start to finish in that way.
So you talk about casting, and there's obviously a lot of cameos in there. How did that come about? Were you looking for things to write for your friends, or did you write something and said, oh, you know what, I think Colin Hanks would be really good for that? How did those come about?
We got them all through Cameo, the app. We just bought them and then did the add-on where you could see them in real life.
Nice.
I guess we started thinking of, Zoe, correct me if I'm wrong, funny scenarios and also cathartic moments that we wanted to explore between the lead characters and other people that started to kind of populate our minds and imaginations as the story was kind of unfolding. And then I think it was kind of an organic, natural process with like, oh yeah, that person, that would be really funny for them. And we started kind of thinking of, okay, who are the great actors that we know? Fortunately, so many of them were available because they were all sitting at home, in the throes of pandemic like we were. And so it just kind of was a very organic process. And then, with that said, we wrote a lot of it, but we also left a lot of it kind of loose and following a structured blueprint of sorts, where we had a lot of the beats that we wanted the actors to hit in certain scenes and kind of a roadmap of where we wanted them to go. But we were really interested in letting the process be fluid as kind of a mirror to what was happening in life anyway, and letting it just kind of happen and let the actors come and approach the material and the work with whatever they were going through as well. So we were very open to letting people be happy, sad, funny. Zoe said in a few past interviews that, you know, some of our actors weren't sure if they could be funny. And that was very true. You know, we were also, it was so new to be going through, you know, making a film, which is already hard enough during this time. And so I think people were a little bit nervous, hesitant, but they kind of just all put it out there, and turns out they were still really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the, I mean, there's so many performances to highlight, but Helen Hunt, I think, you know, it was just magnificent. How early did she come to mind for the role?
She came to mind really early. You know, I was on a show as an actress called Life in Pieces that Helen directed a number of episodes. And so I'd only worked with her as a director. I, of course, was like such a huge fan of hers as an actor. So it was a dream to work with her, you know, directing me, but it was even more of a dream for me to be able to act opposite her. So, you know, a lot of like, selfishly, you know, this film was like a lot of those experiences of like, it would be so fun to act opposite that person. Same with like someone like Olivia, you know, we had never acted opposite each other. We just had been friends and fans of each other's work. So Helen was early on, and she was just so game, you know, in a way that is just so refreshing for, you know, an actor of her stature, you know, to just be like, yeah, let's do it. You know, I have no idea what this thing is, but let's try.
That's great. The scene with Sharon Van Etten is one of my favorites. It's so beautiful. And the way that the movie just gives it a chance to really breathe and just kind of live with that moment. Can you talk about that, about how that came about, both working with her and the idea of just having this sequence where we just kind of had this moment with these characters that was so intimate?
Zoe, I'll let you take that one, since I think Sharon and Zoe's relationship is really beautiful. And so yeah, let Zoe take that.
Thanks, Dee. I mean, I'm just a huge fan of Sharon Van Etten. She's like one of my favorite recording artists of all time. So we became friends, honestly, I think through Instagram, because I posted a video of myself singing a cover of hers, and she reposted it, and then we just started DMing. And she's just such an amazing and lovely and humble person. And so we had been hanging out a little bit, you know, like socially distanced in quarantine, and talking. And yeah, when we were talking about who we would want to see on this sort of apocalyptic journey, I think music is really important to me, obviously, and the idea of sort of stumbling upon a busker came to mind. And Sharon, of course, was like the dream get. And so, yeah, I reached out to her and just said, is this something that, and she's also an actor, you know, so it was kind of the perfect combination. And she was totally down. And it was kind of an amazing story because I didn't want to ask her to write an original like that. I felt like that would be an insane thing to ask of her. And she would never do it. We couldn't afford like a proper cover. So I asked if we could start looking at public domain songs. And so we did start looking at public domain songs, and she ended up choosing this one called Till We Meet Again, which was this like really old timey song. And I was like, sure, I guess, like, I have no idea what that's going to sound like. And then she sent this demo like over a text that was truly like the most haunting, unbelievable rendition, that completely unrecognizable from the original. And I was like, you know, this is incredible. And Kaylee's a singer, and we've sung, Darryl and I and Kaylee have all sung together because we're all sort of musical in that way. And So yeah, so we just created this situation in which we could all be singing together, which again, selfishly, I just wanted to sing with Sharon Van Etten. But on the day of that scene, she texted me and said, I think I want to just write an original.
Wow.
And I was like, what? And so she wrote that song as an original that morning, and sent it to me in a text, and we listened to it in the car ride over to the shoot. And Kaylee like tried to learn some harmonies, and it's a testament to the genius of Sharon Van Etten that that's what she wrote, you know, in that amount of time. And then we ended up using the demo of her cover of Till We Meet Again in the biking montage, which is literally the demo she texted me. And so yeah, we really lucked out, and it's one of my favorite scenes too, and a real like bucket list. This was legit just bucket list stuff for the actual end of the world because we thought we were dying. So I got to sing with Sharon Van Etten before I died.
I mean, that's a great opportunity. So you mentioned Kaylee, who I think is wonderful in this. Now you worked with her in the Craft Legacy. Were you looking to work with her again, or like were you always thinking you'd have something for her, or this came up and you thought she's who to go to?
Yeah, like she became one of my dear, dear friends over the course of filming The Craft and prepping for The Craft, everything. And in The Craft, she was playing of sort of my younger self already. Like that film was loosely based on my own adolescence, you know, minus some of the witchcraft elements. So we had already done a lot of work, you know, in terms of younger self stuff, and particularly when it came to my own younger self. So there was there's just an organic extension that this film came about, and she really wanted to work with Darryl and I. Like when we were in quarantine, we were sort of podding together and talking about projects and feeling stifled and feeling nervous about when any of us would be able to make art again. Like it just, you know, very few things happened yet. So I think it was the day that Darryl and I started to think about her being my younger self, and this idea sort of crystallizing, that Kaylee, like in that moment, texted me like, let's make a movie. It was sort of just like synchronistic in that way. But I knew that I wanted to work with her forever when I started working with her on The Craft Legacy. So it was just kind of like, yeah, I'll keep working with her for the rest of my life if she lets me.
Well, that's great. You know, it's interesting if you look at, you know, Breaking Upwards and Band-Aid, those are I guess traditional relationship films about couples, and this movie is sort of really about an individual, but then by bringing in your younger self, you've made it a relationship film. And I'm wondering how much of that is something in the writing, and how much of that, Zoe, is you wanting to perform against another actor?
Darryl, you can take the writing part, and then I'll answer the performing part.
I guess like, you know, the relationship with the self. Yeah, I mean, I think early on, Zoe and I were like, it's going to be too boring if she's just walking around by herself. You know, like we could do like some sort of really, you know, quiet Kelly Reichardt version of the film, or a kind of, you know, funny voiceover thing. But I think we were always interested in the relationship with the self, because that, as Zoe was saying, was what we were kind of going through and exploring. And so it made natural sense for it to then be physicalized in the Kaylee character, and the dialogue that you have with yourself oftentimes in your head, you know, or when you're just sitting around daydreaming, or yeah, just the thoughts that you have, those stray ideas that come to you about life. What if we could just articulate them in a clearer sense? And, you know, there's always those two people on either shoulder, you know, the one that's like encouraging you forward, and the other one that's always naysaying and negative and like, you can't do it, you know, you holding you down, and you're not good enough, and, you know, who do you think you are? And that part of all of us is so detrimental to happiness and moving positively forward in life. And I think Zoe and I are both on a journey trying to figure out how to continue to optimally live our life to the fullest and not be held back by past trauma and worry about things that are out of our control. And oh, that went away. Are you there? Screen disappeared, but you're still there. And yeah, so much is out of our control in life. And so I think that was what was interesting, was just the being able to wrestle with those concepts and have the younger self be this character that could pop up and remind the older self, like, hey, I'm in you and I'm here too, and I need attention, and have that be a form of catharsis for the character and also for audiences to think about leaving the film. That so much of fulfillment comes from self-acceptance, and also being able to laugh at a lot of the troubles that you find yourself in. So I think that was what was interesting to us, is even though this last year was so difficult, I think everybody at home laughed up for a moment at some point about like needing that extra toilet roll paper at the grocery store, like, the insanity that was happening, despite all of the misery, which there was a great deal of. And, it definitely bogged us all down. If you're not able to look at the bright, it's try and see the light at the end of the tunnel. That depression and that tragedy can really consume you and debilitate you forever. And you have to just kind of continue to fight through it. And so that's kind of where it came from, I guess.
I think we're as writers, both individually and together, we tend to be sort of dialogue heavy. And so, I think like relationship films, obviously, I think we rely a lot on dialogue in telling story. And so this film, was that, as you said, but with a different relationship than most relationship comedies, which are romantically based. This was sort of more of an existential relationship comedy, which I think we were both excited to explore. And for me as a performer, obviously, I was excited. I was excited to wrestle with myself in that way, and get to do that just as a means of catharsis. It was really an important experience for me, because I was sort of at the height of that existential crisis, IRL.
So in the beginning of the shutdown, I guess, as festivals were closing, I think a lot of us as programmers were thinking about, the impact this is going to have on the kind of work that comes out. And I think, we expect to see a lot of pandemic related or COVID specific kind of movies. But I think what I've really been excited to see is, filmmakers like you or like Ben Wheatley or Natalie Morales, who have found a way to tell non-pandemic stories within the pandemic. And I think it's really showed a lot of great creativity. And I'm wondering how much of that were you thinking about, like, we don't want to lean into the pandemic, but we want to use these opportunities of this parallel experience of, feeling like everything's ending. How much did that play into your thinking as you were starting to come up with the story idea?
I think we knew that we didn't want to make a film that was like pandemic centered, but we wanted to make a film that could explore some of the themes that, we were all grappling with. So I think it was definitely intentional to not, we didn't want anyone in a mask. We didn't want like this to be about like, I think we didn't want to be watching that. We generally make things that we want to be watching. And what we were craving as content consumers, at a moment where it was like just so starved for whatever content we could find, was like something that was deeply meaningful, but also could provide some levity. And like, that's an intersection I think we have always tonally explored in our work, but I think, just sort of like doing that within the confines of the pandemic added this new layer to it, where we would be, creating something that could be speaking to those themes, but like none of us want to see a person in a mask. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, we do. Everyone's masked, but like on screen, like we want some sense of escapism while not denying where we're at. So I think that was the line we were trying to toe.
So when you kind of came up with this idea of a comet and the end of the world, were you looking at other kind of end of the world films like, Melancholia or Last Night? Were you trying to kind of address some of those tropes in that genre or try to avoid them? Or was that not part of were you just thinking in a different way?
If you look closely, this is actually a shot-for-shot remake of Armageddon. Bradley Whitford is Bruce Willis. No, we really don't watch those kinds of apocalyptic films very much, and so we didn't really have any reference point. I saw Melancholia a long time ago, and it's funny, we had a few people reference, like the final moment of Melancholia, which I don't think
we
Zoe and I
did look at that.
Yeah, we didn't really talk too much about, like, I don't even remember really what happens in the story of Melancholia, but I just remember Kirsten Dunst being in some sort of fugue state. I don't know. It just kind of, like Zoe's saying, I mean, it was really truly born out of the sense of apocalypse that we were feeling in life. That's really all. And we just knew one thing, that we didn't want to go into the like real doom and gloom terror of it all, because we've seen that so many times. And whether it's, zombies or vampires or, a crazy tidal wave coming, we just obviously couldn't afford that. I think we were just like more interested in a kind of Zen spiritual approach. And I guess the one reference that we did talk about early on was After Hours and Before Sunrise, just in that those films were kind of irreverent walkabouts through a city, which were more focused on character than plot.
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the things, as someone who lives on the East Coast, my vision of LA is just cars. And so seeing a movie that's just a lot of walking, that makes it seem more otherworldly. I don't know if it seems that way to you as well. Like, I don't know if there's an LA that's not filled with cars that you think about.
Well, I mean, I think that was part of also a motivating factor in like capturing that moment in time, because we had never seen an LA without cars, and it was quite surreal and kind of spooky. And so we wanted to like this to serve as a time capsule, in many ways, of this moment that we hope we never have to face again, but where suddenly, LA, it had a very apocalyptic feel.
Actually, I will say a film that did come to my mind when we were conceiving it was that movie I Am Legend, which is that kind of crazy movie with like, zombies attacking Will Smith in New York, but New York was empty. And I don't think we've really seen a film that was like as empty as that, other than like 28 Days Later. And so, yeah, I mean, I think every Angelino would love less cars and kind of wishes that the early Los Angeles city planners had devoted more of their energy to parks and bike paths and less to giant thoroughfares.
Yeah.
One of the things that really strikes me about this, as you're talking about this, is that one of the things that I really responded to in this film is it's an apocalyptic film without the kind of the dread and the violence that comes from your general apocalypse. There's a lot of kindness in this film, which is definitely needed now, but I mean, probably needed always. I think, that seems to be just kind of an outgrowth of your sensibilities. You weren't trying to make a film like an apocalyptic film of dread, but one of hope, maybe a little bit. Would you say so?
For sure. I mean, I think there was something about, I mean, for those of us who were not frontline workers, you know, like there was something about the banality of this apocalyptic moment in all of our lives that was quite interesting, you know, that like the world was sort of ending around us seemingly, but we were all like in sweatpants watching Netflix. And I think that like capturing that sort of the banality of the end was something that we were interested in tonally. And I think because we hadn't seen it before, because it is always, you know, usually like zombies or, you know, just madness and mayhem and violence. And then I think, yes, I think, you know, I think if anything came about, you know, in terms of like what we would hope for the world, it is tenderness and connectivity. And so those were themes that I think, you know, I don't even know if it was like a conscious exploration of them, but it's just like where we were at of just wanting to, what we would want to be doing. I mean, I was having Zooms with people that I never would have reconnected with if it weren't quarantine, you know, and that there were those blessings of quarantine where I think we started to really understand what we did take for granted in our lives. And that's very much what this film is exploring, is like the human connection and how much we, you know, can often take advantage of how important those connections are for us. So I think, yeah, we want it to be gentle. We need gentleness.
I definitely think you succeeded on that. This idea of connection leads me to talk about, so you make a movie during the pandemic, your festival release starts throughout the pandemic. We've been talking a lot to filmmakers this week, and a lot of them are kind of, decrying the loss of people being together in theaters and, this connection. But there are some who've said, you know what, my film actually works really well, like just watching it in your bedroom, like with yourself or with somebody you care about. Like, do you have some thoughts about, this film playing intimately on a smaller screen versus, the community of a big screen?
I mean, I think it's always fun to see a movie in a theater on a big screen with people. Sorry, I don't know if that. Somehow my phone is tethered to my computer, so when I get a call, it comes in through the computer. Sorry. I think, yeah, everyone loves the theater, and we miss going to the theater, and we've been to a few drive-ins during pandemic. I think for a comedy especially, it's always better to be surrounded by other people so that you can laugh together and feel that energy. And I think it's honestly always better to be with people, unless it's distracting and you're the kind of viewer that likes to just not have because sometimes I can go to a film that I really want to pay close attention to, and there can be someone distracting me, either talking or eating something, or I don't know, I'm like paying more attention to what they're doing. So there's pros and cons, obviously, but I think it works both ways. I think watching a movie at home is great as well. You're in the comfort of your own home, and as long as you're not, getting distracted with your phone at home, that is the beautiful thing of the theater. It really does force presence and makes you have to pay attention, which is really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for the record, we at the festival believe in getting people together in theaters, so we're looking forward to that happening again. So speaking of that, I'm sure a lot of our audience here is going to want to share this film with their friends outside of New England. So can you talk about what's next for the film and when people can start seeing it, either as it does its festival run or when it actually comes out and release?
Oh.
What day is it in this Q&A?
It is Sunday, May 16th.
Okay. So yeah, the movie comes out at Tribeca Film Festival June 20th, and then it comes out in theaters and digitally on July 20th. So if you like the film, please, social media, Instagram, tweet. The hashtag is HowItEndsMovie. You can tag Zoe or I or any of the cast members, and then mark your calendar. It would be huge if everybody could pre-buy the film or you know, rent it when it comes out, because that really helps support these independent films so that we can keep making them.
Absolutely. Well, Zoe and Darryl, it's always great to talk to you. We hope so much that for your next project, we can actually bring you in person to Boston. But thank you for spending the time talking to our audience, and thanks for sharing your film with us. It's really lovely. And to everybody watching, thank you for coming. Thanks for being part of this festival. We hope to see you all in theaters very soon. Take care. Good night, everybody.
Bye.